Well, she's US broadcasting and journalistic royalty, or at least she would be if it really was a republic. She, Abby Martin, is a complete and absolute star, and she joins me now from the United States. Abby, I can't tell you how happy I am to see you.
I'm so happy to be on, George. Thank you so much. It's a great honor.
You have done such great work since we last spoke through the Empire Files. But your masterpiece, at least for now, you're still very young, but your masterpiece is the movie that you've just made about Gaza. We'll talk about Gaza, but tell me about the film first.
Right, George. Well, as you know, and as you've been covering for your whole life, Gaza, of course, is one of the largest manufactured humanitarian crises in the world, where Israel is purposefully withholding water for 2.2 million people alongside, essential things that humans need to survive. So we decided to, of course, the Great March of Return had sparked off over a year ago, where over 200 Palestinians have been mowed down by Israeli snipers for simply protesting peacefully with bared chests, facing a fortified military and, countless snipers. So this includes children, disabled, press, medics, protected categories under the Geneva Conventions. Of course, if this were a battle between armies, it would still be highly illegal war crimes. So, of course, we wanted to cover this because the Palestinians that I talked to in Gaza were really stunned at the lack of media coverage and just the kind of same cynicism with the corporate media in terms of what's going on, both sides in it. The passive voice talking about Palestinians died instead of they were murdered. So we worked with a group of Palestinian journalists in Gaza who got the most incredible footage for us, George, just the most cinematic, incredible stuff that they risked their lives every Friday to get. And so we knew that we had to do an entire, feature-length film, not just an Empire Files episode, because the footage was so incredible, and just to do the story proper justice, because, of course, the lack of coverage of this issue is just atrocious.
Well, we have, of course, many of the same problems as you here. And as you say, I've been involved in Gaza for a long time. I have not been able to make a feature-length film about it, and I take my hat off to you for having been able to do it. But it must have been very difficult. I mean, the reason I haven't done it is you couldn't raise the money for it here. As a matter of fact, I can tell you, I once went to the United Arab Emirates, supposedly an Arab country, and literally went around with my hat in hand to a selection of the sons of the late King Sheikh Zayed, asking them to give me the money to make a film about Gaza, and I even failed there. So how did you manage to get the support required to make this film, and how will you handle the inevitable difficulties that you will have in getting onto screens in front of audiences?
My God, George, well, I think you're speaking to the crux of why media, is in such an abysmal state in both the United States, of course, and all Western world. Western media is just atrocious. Yeah. But I mean, we tried to get into Gaza when we were in the West Bank. Of course, the West Bank is, under martial law, pretty horrific what's going on there. But we were actually blocked from getting into Gaza. I was told that I was a propagandist, not a journalist. I'm sure the Israeli military would deem you as the same kind of descriptor. So, it's shocking that we were prevented from getting into Gaza, and also I was deemed an Iranian agent. Here I was thinking that I was a Russian agent and Venezuelan agent. But speaking to your main point is that, we had to shut down Empire Files completely about a year ago and actually launch an entire grassroots fundraiser because of Trump's sanctions on Latin America. Venezuela in particular. So we were hosting our show on Telesur, which is a conglomerate of Latin American states. As we know, as I'm speaking to you, with Sputnik Radio, we have to kind of go to other mediums to try to get support for these views, to challenge these systems. So we had to launch it all grassroots, George. We did all donor-based. It is 100% donor-based grassroots donations that have funded this movie. And we spent pretty much every penny with the Gaza photographers and just with the manpower to make this film. Now, the other step of the way is, how do we get it seen? How do we get it distributed? I mean, this subject matter, it's a third rail subject. No one wants to touch it. And even though there's been countless movies about Gaza, it's always painted as both sides, right? I mean, you can show the misery in Gaza, and you can show the horrors that are going on, but you always, you don't take away any agency, and you don't actually leave watching these movies inspired about you can change the situation. And instead you're told this has been going on for hundreds of years. It's the most complicated conflict in the world. As we know, it's actually one of the most simple.
Quite so. I mean, if someone had wanted to make a film about apartheid South Africa, for a time there would have been resistance, but nothing like the same resistance. In fact, it would have become cool and trendy. You'd have had stars being arrested outside the South African embassy and so on. Indeed, that's what we did have towards the end. You'd have had Paul Simon going to make an album, Diamonds on the Soles of My Shoes, Graceland and all that. But why is it that we can't get the same kind of support for the people in Gaza who are by any measure, and I take the measure of the grandson of Nelson Mandela, who said in London just a few weeks ago that not only is the state of Israel an apartheid state, it is a worse form of apartheid than existed in South Africa. Why is it that so many liberals, so many progressives are able to turn their faces away from the suffering in Gaza, do you think?
I mean, from birth in this country, we are taught that Israel is our closest ally, the greatest democracy in the Middle East, George. I mean, I didn't even know what Palestine was until I was a freshman in college. You hear these kind of, you just peddle propaganda incessantly from the day you're born until, and if people don't get a proper political education and actually understand how the media is manufactured and proposing one specific narrative to indoctrinate the masses, you're not going to understand what's going on. But then again, it's almost like, with social media and they don't have a lockdown of the narrative anymore, there's really no excuse because, Netanyahu used to put out cartoons and these infographics showing, people covering, rocket launchers in a home and all this stuff. I mean, now you just see through social media the atrocities firsthand. So there really is no excuse for Americans to not kind of, become educated and actually understand what's going on. In terms of the political establishment, good God, that question is still the greatest question that I have, George. What is happening? What will it take for these so-called, and even so-called progressive members of Congress to step up and actually stand on the right side of history? It's not hard. Einstein said it during the foundation of Israel. He said, I worry about, what this is happening, and also the conflation of Judaism with political Zionism. That's not going to be good. I mean, he saw it back then. I mean, you had Stephen Hawking's calling for an academic boycott of Israel before he passed away. So it's not hard to wrap your mind around, and it's not hard to propose to do the right thing. But again, I mean, AIPAC has really bought and sold our elected representatives. And it's very, very shameful that we have 26 states now in this country that have already preemptively passed anti-BDS legislation, George, as you know. I mean, that law in Texas.
How does that even work, Abby? I mean, how can I force you to buy Israeli oranges? Or rather, how can I stop you from standing outside your local supermarket and telling other shoppers, you don't want to buy those oranges, there's blood on those oranges? How does that even work?
Well, it's very, very tricky. I mean, they've put it into, hurricane relief grants, let's say independent contractors in the state of Texas. I saw a speech pathologist on Democracy Now! Talking about how she was an independent contractor and she had to sign a contract that said she promises to not boycott Israel to do her job. Now ask yourself, why is it that independent contractors doing hurricane relief rebuilding and speech pathologists are having to promise that they will not boycott Israel in their lifetime in order to receive money? It is getting very, very topsy-turvy, George. I don't actually understand how that would work. I think it's just signing away, signing your soul away on a piece of paper. A lot of this is fine print.
Well, some of the Congress people did so, didn't they?
Yes,
in fact, all but about 12 or 14 voted for this nonsense, this inapplicable nonsense. It can't possibly be applied for the reasons I just inferred, and you confirmed that nobody knows how, other than holding people to ransom, make them sign a form, sign their soul away. Even Tulsi Gabbard, who's been making such really good statements about Venezuela, about the proposed war on Iran, many other foreign policy things. She's been really very good. Even she was in the lobby for this anti-BDS bill.
Right, and let's get this out of the way. It is an AIPAC resolution. Although it's non-binding, it has tremendous implications. It also sets a very dangerous precedent to, have a full frontal assault and pass more harsh measures in the future. Again, 27 states rather, have already passed anti-BDS legislation. So this is just a stepping stone, George. And let's call them out. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard, Ayanna Pressley. Ayanna Pressley is depicted as one of the most progressive Congress members. Ro Khanna. This is a person who was, co-sponsoring the trying to get the Yemen war coming to an end. So what is this mealy mouth, both sides, talking out both sides of their mouths? It's pretty astounding. Tulsi Gabbard, though, when you look at her record, she almost is trying to play both sides here because, she spoke at the Christians United for Israel conference in 2015. She got an award by Rabbi Shmuley in 2016 at the kind of who's of Israel Defenders Gala. Alongside Cory Booker and, Netanyahu was there. So, yeah, I mean, even though she was on record saying a couple months ago she would staunchly defend and oppose any anti-BDS legislation, I don't understand what's going on here. You really have nothing to lose, especially if you're branding yourself as the anti-war candidate. So I don't see, I see anti-war as kind of hand in hand with anti-occupation. And let's just call out all the progressive contenders for the 2020 election, George, because I went through all of them and they all have abysmal records. All of them kind of pontificate about how they need a two-state solution, right? But what does that really mean? When you look at all of their records, they're all complete Israel hawks, cowering in the face of the AIPAC lobby. And the only person, and mind you, Bernie Sanders was actually very bad on this in 2014 during the massacre that took the lives of 2,200 Palestinians, including 500 children. But now, today, Bernie Sanders is the only one who actually articulates what the two-state solution would actually look like to him. He's actually calling to withdraw settlements to the 1967 borders. Now, George, in the new Hamas charter, that's actually what Hamas calls for. They've actually, accepted the state of Israel, and they've rejected anti-Semitism and the rejection of the conflation with political Zionism. So the peace can be done tomorrow, but it's this complete obfuscation and distortion of what is really happening. Netanyahu and all the ruling coalition parties in Israel have openly declared that they are going to pledge to annex the rest of the West Bank, and they don't want a state. So what is going on here?
I think President Sanders, and please God, I'm able to live to see that. President Sanders has said that if president, he would make conditional the aid that the U.S. gives to Israel on precisely the political solution you describe, and an end to the incessant, real murder, mass murder that goes on in the occupied Palestinian West Bank, in annexed Jerusalem, and in besieged Gaza. He's the only one that's been clear about that, in my view. Absolutely.
Absolutely. I mean, make no mistake about it. These people, progressive except for Palestine is not progressive at all, George. And as we know, as people who've been on the front lines of the anti-war movement in this country and around the world for the last decade, I mean, when the Iraq War was sparking off, the anti-war resistance would not include pro-Palestinian rights. They would not include a free Palestine because it was too controversial at the time. Fast forward 15 years, you're not progressive if you don't support a free Palestine clearly and loudly. So polls are actually reflecting a significant drop in support from Democratic voters on this issue and Republican voters, because again, the Great March of Return makes, there's no distortion whatsoever when you're looking at the footage of children being mowed down in broad daylight by Israeli snipers for simply protesting. We all should have the right to freely protest. We all should have the right to live freely. That's the most basic right as a human being. So yeah, there's no excuses anymore. And it's time to start holding people accountable for their actions, George. And that means people who are voting with AIPAC resolutions that Netanyahu is cheering on.
Well, amen to that. Tell us when the film will be available, please, Abby, how people can see it, and how people can generally support your work.
Right, so the film, we actually added a couple sections after the big premiere in LA, so we're excited about that to kind of leave, really leave no questions about Hamas, about the peaceful nature of this march really having nothing to do with Hamas, because of course that's what the corporate media will say, till they're blue in the face, is Hamas, Hamas, Hamas. Hamas is throwing people in the way of the bullets, George.
Yeah.
It's just unbelievable. So this film, what we're really hoping to do with this film is to unequivocally point on broad daylight systematic war crimes, systematic targeted executions and assassinations of those protected categories in the Geneva Conventions, George. And we actually highlight how incredible Gazan women have been on the front lines of this struggle, organizing, basically doing the hard, solid work on the ground. So we are putting that film up at the end of the month, early August at the latest. It's going to be GazaFightsForFreedom.com, and people can support us on Patreon and other means to donate to us, because again, we are going forward just solely on donations here because we know how taboo this issue is. And
now,
it really
on the Patreon, is that in the name of the film, or is that the Empire Files Patreon?
Patreon.com/Empire Files.
I will do that myself tonight when I get home, and I'm encouraging everyone else to do it, because there's nobody more deserving of financial support. Looking at the crimes of empire, looking at the fight against empire, shirking from none of those fights than you and your outfit. Abby, I've got a Skype message for you. Let's take a look at it together.
Let's do it.
Hey George, Jesse, Dayton, Ohio again. Just wanted to know if there was any way to help Abby, to donate to Abby, Patreon, anything like that. And just going to see if you'd highlight it on the show. Thank you. Love you guys.
Thank you, my friend. Well, there you are. I preempted him in a way. I should have timed that better. But Patreon/Empire Files, or the Empire Files? Abby?
Empire Files, just
Empire Files, just Empire.
Not the Empire Files, just
because
Empire.
Because there's more than one empire, so of course.
Right.
But finally, before I let you go, and I'm grateful for your time, this really irks me. You're often in California. I'm myself going to California in November. I know that there are a lot of people in Hollywood and in the entertainment industry, in the music industry, who would regard themselves as liberals and progressives, some of them even more left than that. Some of them would regard themselves as socialists. I'm just wondering how they justify their complete disinterest in the suffering of millions of people for which they, as American citizens, are directly responsible. You see, sometimes our enemies here in Britain, they say to me, why are you endlessly talking about Palestine? There are many other crimes in the world. And I always make the point that one of the reasons why is that my country created it. So if not me, who? Now, in the United States, without you, without your tax dollars, without your military, political, propaganda, and financial material, none of this suffering of the Palestinian people would be possible. So, you get up close and personal with such people from time to time. Do you think they imagine Palestinians are children of a lesser God? Is it something they feel guilty about? Or are they genuinely, absolutely, willfully blind about it?
It's a really good question, George. I think that, we're talking about a country steeped in historical ignorance, and also I call us empire babies. I mean, these people really do believe in American exceptionalism. They believe that we're the greatest country in the world, and I think they have complete contempt for the notion of internationalism and solidarity with people who are oppressed, especially living under the boot of the U.S. empire. Yeah, I get asked that question many times as well, and I always answer the same way. I personally am an American citizen. I can only do what I can do. I can fight and lobby my own government as an American citizen to stop providing impunity for this settler colonial state that is committing ongoing ethnic cleansing on a daily basis. So yeah, when we're sponsoring apartheid Israel with $10 million of American tax dollars every day, damn straight, I'm going to talk about this till the day I die. Until Palestine is free, George, because people like Cory Booker and Kamala Harris, these victors of the debate, these people of color who want to tout progressive values, they are disgusting when it comes to Israel. So no, you're not progressive if you want to pretend to care about immigrants, but you think Palestinian children are vermin. I'm sorry, it's time to start calling out reality for what it is. And
You're
I'm not going to make
They're forever crying on TV, Mado and all, crying on TV about immigrant children being held in camps just across your border. But the Palestinian children in camps are being literally murdered by your tax dollars.
Literally murdered, George. And that's what this movie, we're hoping to do with this movie, is push the needle for accountability, because the U.S. will continue to veto any sort of resolution against Israel. They will continue to provide impunity for this apartheid state until we fight, until we mobilize the masses into a huge anti-war movement that includes a free Palestine to pressure our government to end this, George, because they're using butterfly bullets, they're using exploding bullets, they're using gas that is making people causing seizures and to suffocate and die. That's just two of the crimes that are ongoing at this Great March. And as you know, it's an ongoing massacre, one of the most egregious massacres of unarmed protesters in modern history. Yeah. And if you're not going to stand up now, then what will you stand for?
Exactly. You've got a lot of fans. Here's another Skype message. Let's see if we can get that one up. It's a video how to Skype. My apologies. Abby, you already know how to Skype, and we've had a half hour of great Skype. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on the Mother of All Talk Shows. God bless you and your work and the film. Everybody who can, support Abby Martin on Patreon. Look out for her film. We'll try and get the details up on the screen. Let's take a video.